Welcome to NarrativeNook audio tales where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening.
That's not it. Juwe Misunderstood. Electra hurriedly said. Madeline smiled wryly at her. A Jack would never hand over the antidote if you didn't do it. It's fine. I won't blame you. It's the only way to save Roxanne. I merely feel sorry for her. My best friend was first poisoned and subjected to physical agony, but when she wakes up, she has to face the pain of losing her lover. When Electra noticed how unhappy the doctor was, she anxiously wanted to explain but was unsure whether she could, so she could only look at Lucian to seek his opinion. Directly taking over the conversation, Lucian stated in a low voice, This is merely a trick we pulled on Jack. It's all fake. This is Electra Lane, a childhood friend of mine. She went abroad with her family to build their business for a few years and just returned to the country 2 days ago. I merely asked her to assist me in playing a part. Electra nodded in agreement. However, Madeline had a hard time processing what he said. What do you mean? Fake? But isn't this a marriage certificate? How can it be fake when even the marriage certificate is completed? Electra could not help but chuckle. This isn't a legitimate document. After saying that, she tore up the marriage certificate right in front of Madeline. Madeline was stunned by what she did, but as she watched the marriage certificate being ripped to shreds, she slowly started to believe it. She cast her a grateful look. Thank you. If it wasn't for you, Roxanne might have. It's not a big deal. It's just a fake marriage, and I have nothing to lose. All is good as long as she can wake up, Electra replied with a grin. After learning that the two had a fake marriage, Madeline felt more at ease. All that remained was worrying about when Roxanne would wake up. Time ticked by. The three of them grew increasingly worried when they realized that more than 2 hours had passed. Why is she still unconscious? Lucian could not help but turn and question Madeline. After all, she had the most experience as the sole doctor in the room. Madeline also looked slightly confounded, and when she spoke, she sounded a little hesitant. I don't know either. A swell of anger and uneasiness gradually rose within Lucian. Is this antidote real? How can you be sure? If that despicable Jack wants to see me in a wretched state and gave me a fake antidote. He was livid when he thought of that possibility. He wanted nothing more than to drag Jack before of him immediately and get clear answers. Seeing his irate expression, Madeline frowned and replied, I don't think it's fake. As you witnessed just now, Roxanne's symptoms did subside after she consumed the antidote. It probably only takes some time for the antidote to take full effect. Let's wait a little longer. Electra also chimed in, judging by Jack's expression as he retrieved the antidote just now, it doesn't seem to be a fake. Especially the intense response he gave when Lucian questioned him. Despite not knowing whatever happened between them, Electra understood that if Jack truly needed Roxanne in the future, he probably would not harm her. Lucian could only suppress his inner rage after hearing their words. Zane brought food to the three of them right on time. However, they were not in the mood to eat and continued to wait anxiously. Electra could not help but feel a little strange as she stared at the person lying on the hospital bed. It was her first time meeting Roxanne, who was still unconscious and had never said a word to her. Yet, she somehow felt the same way as Madeline, as if the person lying on the hospital bed was her friend. After over an hour, when the sun was up in the sky, Roxanne finally opened her eyes.
Roxanne.
The very second her eyes opened, Lucian noticed the change. He grabbed her hand and stared at her with bloodshot eyes. When Madeline saw her good friend waking up, tears rolled down her cheeks. She reached out to grab Roxanne's other hand as laughter escaped her lips. Roxanne, you're finally awake. You have no idea how frightened we'd been. I thought you... Madeline trailed off, unable to finish her sentence. Roxanne had just woken up from her coma, so the gears in her head were slow to turn. After a while of recollecting herself, she recalled what had happened before she fell unconscious. Was I unconscious for that long? She asked in disbelief as she shifted her gaze from Madeline to Lucian. When she saw how haggard he looked and noticed the red veins in his eyes, a wave of guilt crashed into her. I'm sorry to have worried you both. Then she tried to sit upright on the bed. However, she had been in a coma for 3 days, so she did not have the strength to do that. Just lie down on the bed. How do you feel? Do you feel unwell anywhere? Madeline knew what Roxanne was trying to do, and she quickly pressed her friend back down on the bed. Roxanne had no choice but to do as Madeline said. She then asked worriedly, where are the kids? I was unconscious for so long. They must be freaking out. She remembered how the children had tears streaming down their faces the last time she fell unconscious. Every time she thought about that, her heart would ache. I wonder how they reacted to this. Lucian caressed her cheek in a soothing manner as he said to her, they don't know about this yet. I told them you went on a business trip and will only be back tomorrow night. Roxanne relaxed a little at that, but her attention was back to his exhausted look. Slowly, she reached out to touch his face. Lucian let go of her. Have you not rested these days? Roxanne asked, her brows furrowed as guilt appeared in her eyes. It was her first time seeing Lucian looking so tired. Although Lucian had also been worried the last time she was unconscious, it had not been long before she woke up. However, she learned that, this time, she had been out for 3 days. She was sure that Lucian had not rested during these days. His bloodshot eyes and eye bags were a clear sign of that. I'm just glad that you're awake. Nothing else matters. It's just a few days of sleep. Lucian chuckled, unbothered. He reached out to grab Roxanne's hand and squeezed it. I'm glad that you woke up in the end. During the few hours of waiting, he had come up with a plan to deal with the Damaris family. Luckily, Roxanne had woken up. Another wave of guilt washed over Roxanne. I'm really sorry. I shouldn't have been stubborn. If she had known that things would turn out this way, she would have gone to the hospital in the afternoon when she felt unwell. She might not have made them worry so much if she had done that instead, and she might not have ended up this way. Lucian continued holding onto her hand gently and carefully. His voice was deep and soothing as he said, nothing matters as long as you're fine and well. This isn't your fault. In fact, it's mine. It's his fault? Roxanne was confused. She did not know why Lucian would say that. Did something else happen while I was unconscious? After saying that, Lucian dropped the topic and started asking about how she was instead. How do you feel now? It was then he realized that he had not summoned the doctor, so he turned to Madeline and said, could you please call the doctor? Madeline bobbed her head, and when she went out of the room, she asked Electra to go with her. Lucian had been blocking most of Roxanne's vision, and Electra had been subconsciously standing away from Roxanne's line of sight, fearing that she would make Roxanne upset. Roxanne did not notice that there was a fourth person in the room. It was only when Madeline led Electra out did Roxanne see her. Roxanne started, turning to Lucian in confusion. She did not think much about it, thinking Electra was Madeline's friend. After a moment of silence, Lucian said honestly, she's my friend. Roxanne stiffened. I don't remember seeing her around. Regardless of whether it was 6 years ago or 6 years after, the only friends of Lucian she knew of were the two from the Queen family. She had never heard of the other woman in the room. Lucian explained, she's the Lane family's daughter. The Lanes are family friends of the Farwell, but before you married into the Farwell family, the Lanes went overseas to develop their business. They didn't come back during that time, and we didn't contact each other either. She just returned to the country 2 days ago. Roxanne nodded in understanding. Did she come to meet you? Right then, she noticed the clock on the wall. It was already 6 in the morning. No one would come to the hospital for a chat with an old friend at a time like that. Furthermore, it seemed that Electra had been around for a while. Hesitation flashed past Lucian's eyes. Roxanne knew him like the back of her hand, so she instantly figured out that something was up. Grabbing his sleeve, she asked, Also, what happened to me? I remember diagnosing myself before I went into a coma, and I was showing signs of poisoning. However, she had no idea when she had been poisoned. A look of shock flitted across Lucian's eyes. He knew that Roxanne was medically skilled, but he did not know she was as capable as this. Roxanne nodded in understanding. Did she come to meet you? The doctors he had hired could not do anything about her case, but she had managed to figure out the cause of her condition just by taking her own pulse. If you realize that, why didn't you tell me about it? Roxanne lowered her gaze guiltily. I didn't think it'd be this serious, and I didn't want you to worry about me. In the end, I still made you worry so much. Lucian was exasperated, but there was nothing he could do about it. You have to tell me right away if you feel unwell in the future. Roxanne nodded meekly. Have you found out what kind of poison is in me? You must have, right? I wouldn't have woken up otherwise. If she learned what kind of poison had been in her system, she might be able to figure out when she had been poisoned. Lucian nodded. Jack used an essential oil to poison you, but they haven't come to a conclusion as to what was in the poison. Jack. Roxanne was baffled. Why would he do that? The Damaris family is a family of doctors. Why would they let Jack poison me with the medicinal herbs? Moreover, how could Jack be so vicious? What is he trying to do? Roxanne's surprise was something Lucian had expected. Nevertheless, he did not plan to hide anything about Jack from her. He wanted her to find out how dangerous Jack was so that she would stay far from him. Every time you talked business with him, he had been using an aroma lamp to diffuse the poison he made. The poison only takes effect after a few times of exposure. Lucian revealed Jack's nefarious plan. A thought popped into Roxanne's mind when she heard that. No wonder. No wonder what? Roxanne met his eyes and said, I clearly rejected him about the collaboration with Damaris Group, but Jack suddenly came to the research institute and asked to have a talk about it in the car. I caught a whiff of something in the car, but I didn't dwell on it at that time. It must have been the last dose of poison from Jack. Upon realizing that, Roxanne found a chill running down her spine when she thought about Jack's face. I thought he was benevolent because he was a doctor, but now I'm starting to doubt my beliefs. She could not believe a Damaris would be that devious. That's why I said it's my fault that this happened to you. Lucian's guilt and self-blame were visible in his eyes. Roxanne snapped back to her senses at his words and disagreed with him. Why would you say that? This was Jack's fault. A wry smile was on Lucian's lips as he ran his fingers through her long hair. If I hadn't taught you how to negotiate with others, you wouldn't have got into a conflict with him regarding the profits. I'd rather have you settle on a 50-50 profit back then. With a solemn look, Roxanne raised her hand to grab his. That's not how things work. Even if you didn't teach me those skills, I'd still have insisted on my idea. In fact, this might have dragged on even longer. He couldn't find the chance to give me the last dose because of the skills you taught me, and that was why he ended up coming to the research institute instead. Something in her mind told her that Jack might have been poisoning her for an even longer time than Lucian had assumed. Roxanne could already sense the changes in Jack before this collaboration. Her poisoning was already set in stone. It did not matter what Lucian did. As a matter of fact, if not for Lucian, she might not have actually remained alive this time. Right then, another thought entered her mind and brought a furrow to her brows. Jack's such a meticulous person with his plan. Would he have given you the antidote so easily? Did you agree to something? Lucian did not intend to hide anything from her, so he told her Jack's terms. It was then Roxanne learned about Jack's greed. He had demanded 10 subsidiaries from Lucian and Lucian to marry another woman. Roxanne was livid. He's too much. I'm the one who's been poisoned, but Jack is targeting Farwell Group. He's even trying to separate us. Are you really going to give him 10 subsidiaries? What about Farwell Group? Will the other shareholders agree with this? Will they find fault with you for that? Roxanne was worried. In contrast, Lucian laughed, unbothered. It's only 10 subsidiaries. My management is why those 10 subsidiaries are making a profit. As long as I want, I can make any subsidiary make a profit. I doubt they'll make as much if I hand them over to Jack. Roxanne had no qualms about Lucian's capability in business management. She relaxed slightly after hearing his reply. She was confident that Lucian could fix the loss caused by these 10 subsidiaries. Right then, she recalled the unfamiliar woman earlier in the ward. Is Miss Lane the one you married? Roxanne's eyes were dull as she asked that question. Even though he did that to save her, the very thought of him marrying another woman made her upset. In fact, she started to pull her hand away, wanting to keep a distance from him. There was a hint of anger that flashed across Lucian's eyes as he tightened his grip on her hand when he noticed her struggles. Do you have that little trust in me? He was talking about Electra, as well as Archie and Benny's parentage. Roxanne froze when she sensed his fury. A moment later, a flame of hope began burning in her chest. Does he mean that there's something else behind this? But he has already gotten the antidote and saved me. There's no way something else happened instead. The woman on the bed had just woken up from her coma, so Lucian could not bring himself to be angry with her. He tamped down his fury and explained in a low voice, she isn't interested in me in that way, and that's the same for me. Faking a marriage with her is only one of the steps in going up against Jack. Hearing that, Roxanne felt apologetic. She parted her lips, but she did not know how to apologize to him. Something in her mind was telling her that Lucian would not be this angry if that was the only reason. Right as they were in the middle of a tense silence, some noises came from outside the ward. Madeline and Electra had returned with the doctors. The doctors strode in, but they were taken aback by the tension in the room just as they stepped inside. No one dared to say a word for a moment. Roxanne, these doctors were the ones treating you while you were in a coma, Madeline said. Roxanne flashed them a grateful smile. Thank you for the past few days. The doctors glanced at Lucian's expression before waving their hands. Mr. Farwell's the one who hired us. If you want to thank someone, thank Mr. Farwell. Roxanne turned to the person beside her. Thank you. Lucian frowned in exasperation. He did not speak, but he hummed in acknowledgement. Roxanne relaxed when she heard that before turning to look at Electra. Miss Lane, I've heard what happened from Lucian. We're strangers to each other, but you've helped me so much. Thank you. Electra could tell that Roxanne and Lucian were in a disagreement, so she offered a smile and tried to ease the tension. I only agreed to it when I saw how anxious Lucian was for you. Honestly, I was curious as to what kind of person you were when I saw how worried he was. After seeing you, I finally understood why he felt that way. You do seem like a good match for him. Roxanne's face burned, and she stole a glance at the man beside her before thanking Electra again. Electra continued smiling and went silent. The doctors carefully started. She will be giving the patient a checkup now, so... They wanted to ask Lucian and the others to leave the ward, but they dared not voice it out loud at the sight of Lucian's dark expression. Fortunately, Roxanne helped them out by saying, you guys should head outside for now. Lucian gave her a long look at that, and she responded with a reassuring smile. I'm fine now. Besides, the antidote was something you've gotten on your own. Don't worry. Only then did Lucian stand up and leave the room. Lucian and Electra left the ward. Madeline, too, did not stay back because she was tired from staying awake the whole night. Here. Have some food. Now that Roxanne's awake, we can relax. When Madeline stepped out of the ward, she brought along the dishes sent by the director. Seeing that, Electra took it from her, saying, I'll heat them up. Noting Lucian was still looking rather gloomy, Madeline hurriedly followed Electra. The two women did not know what Lucian and Roxanne talked about, which made the couple look so gloomy. Nonetheless, the only thing Madeline and Electra could do at that moment was to let him calm down. By the time the two returned, Lucian looked slightly better. Electra carefully divided the dishes into 3 portions and handed one each to Madeline and Lucian. When Lucian saw the plate of food, he frowned. Just as he was about to refuse it, Electra spoke. "I just have some. You look terrible. You should use this time to replenish your energy. After all, Miss Jarvis still needs you to take care of her." With that, she brought the plate closer to him. This time, Lucian finally took it. Even the frown on his forehead lightened. Thank you. I didn't expect you to agree to my request." When he chose to tell Electra the truth at the Farwell main residence, he thought a lady from a rich family like her would hesitate. To his surprise, she agreed to it without hesitation. Now that he thought about it, there would be a delay in getting the antidote if Electra hesitated. With the poison acting up right on time, Roxanne would have died if they were a second too late. The thought of that possibility felt like a knife stabbing through his heart. A grim look fleeted across her eyes as she saw the concerned look on his face. When he turned to look at her, she immediately put on a smile. "You don't need to thank me. That's how things should be when we have such a good relationship. If not for Miss Jarvis, perhaps I might be your wife now." Lucian's gaze dimmed when he heard that. "You?" Madeline, too, was shocked and approached them. She cast Electra a look of wariness. The last person who said something like that was Aubrey. She looks so innocent and kind. Could she be the same as Aubrey? Seeing the two taking her words so seriously, Electra chuckled. It's a joke. Although I'm a little envious of the way you treat Miss Jarvis, I believe I'll find a man who can treat me like that sooner or later." The smile on her face looked sincere. Lucian stared at her for a few seconds before relaxing his brows and nodding in agreement. "Yeah, I'm sure there'll be one." Madeline nodded as well. "Miss Lane, you're a pretty woman. I'm sure there are many people who like you." "I'd rather not have so many people like me. It's too difficult to pick someone who'll be sincere toward me out of so many people." Electra sounded almost exasperated, which tickled Madeline's funny bone. They looked like old friends who had not met for many years. In the meantime, Lucian turned to look through the windows. The warmth in his eyes was apparent when he saw Roxanne, who was surrounded by the specialists. With that, the trio ate some food in the corridor. The atmosphere there was drastically different from how it was in the ward earlier. After their meal, Electra bid farewell since she had no plans to stay. "I should go home. My family will start getting suspicious if I don't." Nodding, Lucian said, "Please let me know if your parents face any problems. I'll handle it." Electra nodded with a smile. Okay." Right then, Lucian glanced at the time and remembered they had not slept the entire night. Hence, he called out, Wait. I'll get my assistant to send you home." He then turned to Madeline and said, You should go home and get some sleep, too. You haven't been resting much since you took care of Roxanne for the past few days. I can handle this now that she's awake." Madeline did not bother arguing with him. "I'll leave Roxanne with you, then." Recalling the atmosphere in the ward earlier, she grew worried and added, Roxanne has just recovered. Don't be mad at her. You two can talk it out when she's discharged." Lucian said nothing and gave Caden a call to pick the two women up. Very quickly, Caden arrived and went upstairs to meet them. Soon, Lucian was the only one left in the corridor. The experts had completed the examination and called out to him, Mr. Farwell." Hearing that, Lucian nodded and marched over. Indeed, the doctors had finished examining her, but all of them were frowning. How did it go?" Lucian felt his heart sink, and he glanced at the person on the hospital bed with worry. Roxanne smiled faintly, but she still looked a little pale. When she met his gaze, she smiled wider as if she was trying to console him. Lucian's brows creased. and he went over to hold her hand. The doctors had been mulling over the matter for some time before finally having the guts to call him in. After hesitating for a few seconds, one of them informed him, the hardening of Mrs. Farwell's arteries has visibly reduced, and her bleeding point is also showing signs of recovery. However, based on their examination, she was only showing signs of recovery instead of complete recovery. The doctors did not know how to tell Lucian the rest. Lucian could tell they had not finished their sentence. Thus, he questioned coldly, when will she be cured completely then? The doctors exchanged looks. They could not give him a definite answer for the time being. With a smile, Roxanne piped up, I'll be cured soon. Please leave first, doctors. I just woke up and am still feeling a little tired. I'd like some quiet. Hearing that, Lucian frowned at her. You aren't cured. Roxanne gave him a reassuring smile. Don't forget, I'm a doctor myself. I'd already diagnosed myself as being poisoned before I passed out. No one knows my body better than I do. The experts were flabbergasted to hear that. They could not believe Roxanne had found her diagnosis before passing out. After all, they had racked their brains yet could not find the cause for her symptoms. They stared at the woman on the hospital bed in amazement, shocked by her incredible medical skills. Lucian's gaze dimmed, but he agreed when he saw the determined look on her face. Please go out first. He had to admit Roxanne's medical skills were way better than the doctor's. Upon hearing his words, the experts nodded and gave the couple privacy. With that, only Lucian and Roxanne were left in the room. Lucian lowered his gaze to stare at Roxanne with his heart filled with an inexplicable feeling. She had already consumed the antidote and was awake, yet he felt a heavy feeling in his heart as if there was a rock on it. Roxanne could tell that he was worried, so she sat up slowly on the bed and said, Don't worry. I'm really fine. The doctors said I'm recovering. Besides, I can feel the antidote you brought worked. Lucian cast her a gloomy gaze. Do you remember what you said? Roxanne chuckled and assured, I'll tell you if anything happens. Only then did Lucian feel slightly relieved. Roxanne's gaze drooped slightly with a hint of worry fleeted across. What are you thinking about? Lucian asked softly when he noticed something was amiss with her. Roxanne quickly dismissed her thoughts, recollected herself, and looked up. I'm worried about the kids. I can't help but think how they are doing now. When he heard that, the suspicion in his gaze dissipated. Since you're already awake, we can give them a call at night. They'll be relieved to hear from you. Roxanne bobbed her head. Hopefully. With that, she looked down again. Seeing that, Lucian furrowed his brows, and worry filled his gaze again. Are you feeling discomfort anywhere? Roxanne looked up innocently before caressing her belly with a sigh. After being unconscious for several days, I'm feeling a little hungry. And speaking about the kids made me think of the desserts they eat. So, I feel like eating some desserts now. I'll get you some, just said Lucian without hesitation. Roxanne frowned, looking troubled. But I just woke up, and I'm not allowed to eat greasy stuff. Desserts are out of the question. Lucian could sense the emotion in her voice, and his heart softened. Bear with it for a while, okay? You can have some fruits. He then turned around and patted Roxanne's head affectionately. Roxanne frowned in silence for a few seconds before giving a hum in response. I want to have fruits from the stall beside the research institute. Their fruits are sweet, she said. She gave Lucian a shy glance. Am I being too troublesome? You can actually get some from downstairs, too. Lucian would never say no to her request. After all, he almost lost her. It's no trouble at all. I'll get you some now. I'll get the doctors to wait for you out there. Just tell them if there's anything you need. Roxanne nodded. Be careful. Without saying anything, Lucian turned around and left. Upon arriving at the door, he told the doctors to wait inside. The doctors thought something was happening to Roxanne's body again. As soon as they entered the ward, they looked through the windows and saw her sitting on the hospital bed, safe and sound. They exchanged confused glances with each other. She just woke up. Where on earth is Mr. Farwell going now? Just as they were coming up with all kinds of answers, Roxanne's voice rang out. Is he gone? Roxanne looked outside the ward. The doctors froze for a few seconds before they realized Roxanne was talking to them. At the same time, they surmised she was referring to Lucian. The doctors were confused all of a sudden. Did they get into an argument? Mr. Farwell was so anxious when Ms. Jarvis fainted. How is it that they got into a fight right after she woke up? The chemistry between the two was clearly awkward when we entered just now. When she did not hear an answer from them, Roxanne was confused and wanted to step out and take a look. Seeing what she was doing, the others snapped out of their reverie and hurried into the ward. Is there something you need, Mrs. Farwell? Only then did Roxanne sit down and ask, is Lucian gone? The doctors nodded hesitantly, their gazes filled with puzzlement. Noting their expressions, Roxanne smiled. I told him to get some fruits for me. It should take him some time to come back. Anyway, I need to talk to all of you. The doctors heaved a sigh of relief and nodded. In the next second, Roxanne's expression became serious. You guys should have gotten the results of the examination on the state of my recovery, right? The antidote worked, but it only slowed the effects of the poison for the time being. In short, it cannot cure me completely. If it's allowed to develop, the poison might make a comeback. In other words, Jack gave her only part of the antidote. It was his method of poisoning her. The antidote Jack gave needed to be taken several times. However, he had only given Lucian one dose. Roxanne had already suspected that when the doctors were examining her body. However, she was confident she could solve the problem without letting Lucian worry about it. That was why she came up with an excuse to make him leave so she could discuss it with the doctors. The second she finished speaking, the atmosphere in the room became tense. The doctors found it weird when they realized her recovery was extremely slow. Never did they expect Roxanne to have made an accurate prognosis of her condition in such a short time. All of a sudden, admiration brimmed in their eyes as they stared at Roxanne. They quickly returned to their senses and jumped into the discussion. You're right. The poison in your body is really unusual. To tell you the truth, we couldn't identify you were poisoned before Mr. Farwell told us about it. After we confirmed you were poisoned, we couldn't figure out what kind of poison it was. Roxanne frowned. Did you do a blood test? The doctors nodded dejectedly. We tested everything that could be tested. Still, there are no leads. A grim look flashed through Roxanne's eyes. All of you are world-renowned experts. I doubt you discovered nothing over the past few days. Please tell me, even if it's just a guess. I need your help. The way the doctors looked at her shifted again. They believed she was well aware that her medical skills were far greater than theirs, yet she was saying she needed their help. Moreover, she seemed to trust them a lot. For the past few days, the doctors were feeling incredibly disheartened. However, her words gave them confidence again. After exchanging glances, they put on a more professional air and grew more confident. At that, they began describing all the tests and guesses they had for the past few days. While Roxanne listened, she nodded thoughtfully. When they finished talking, Roxanne paused her thoughts and flashed them a grateful smile. I have some guesses, too, but I need your help to run a blood test. I want to confirm some things. Everyone was shocked by how fast Roxanne had figured something out. Is there a problem? She asked in confusion when she saw the surprised looks on their faces. Still in shock, none of the experts said anything in response. Thinking they were worried about Lucian, Roxanne reassured them with a smile. All you guys have to do is follow my instructions. I'll explain things to Lucian if he finds out. Everyone gasped in shock when they heard that. Does Mr. Farwell not know about this? They had assumed the tense atmosphere in the ward was due to Lucian finding out about the matter. Given the seriousness of the situation, they were surprised to hear that Roxanne didn't tell Lucian about it. Roxanne lowered her gaze and replied worriedly, I think I might be able to save myself. He has been worried sick about me throughout the past few days, so I don't want to worry him any further. Please help me keep this a secret from him. She then flashed the experts a smile as she continued, I have faith in you guys, so please have some faith in me as well. I'll figure something out. Moved by her confidence and determination, the experts gave in after a few seconds of hesitation. Since you trust us so much, we'll do everything we can to help you out, Mrs. Farwell. Roxanne breathed a sigh of relief and thanked them profusely. Thank you all very much. As most of them were much older than her, she maintained a polite and respectful attitude when speaking to them. The experts, however, felt she was being far too humble. No need to thank us, Mrs. Farwell. You are Dr. Lambert's greatest student, after all. To be honest, we thought the news article was exaggerating when it said you had great medical skills. It wasn't until we met you in person that we realized it wasn't exaggerating at all. Roxanne simply flashed them a polite smile in response. We're all doctors here, so you guys can just call me Dr. Jarvis. You're practically a miracle worker, Dr. Jarvis. Despite your young age, your knowledge of medicine is far greater than ours. We all have some things that we excel in. I just happen to be good at traditional medicine, Roxanne said. She then glanced at the time and noticed that Lucian would be coming back soon. Anyway, time is of the essence. We should hurry up and draw my blood, she urged them, as they would have no time to do it once Lucian returned. The experts nodded and quickly got down to work. After extracting her blood, one of the experts sent it to the laboratory for testing while the others waited outside. About 5 minutes later, the elevator slowly came to a halt at the top floor. Lucian stepped out a few seconds later with a huge bag of assorted fruits. Lucian narrowed his eyes when he saw the experts waiting outside the ward. Where's Dr. Wagley? Not only did Lucian possess a terrifyingly good memory, but the experts have also been there for a few days. As such, he was able to memorize each and every one of their names and faces. The experts did not expect him to notice that one of them was missing, so they were completely caught off guard. DDR. Wagley went to the bathroom. He should be returning shortly, said one of the experts nervously after a brief pause. Lucian frowned suspiciously at them before entering the ward. Roxanne had already regained her composure by then and was scrolling through her phone on the bed. Madeline had arrived home and was asking about her condition. Not wanting her to worry, Roxanne simply told her that she was in the process of recovering. She put her phone away when Lucian made his way toward the bed. While placing the fruits aside, he glanced at her phone and asked, who were you texting?
Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.